It's Way Up with Angela Yee, and this is exciting. I have Derek Lewis here. Hi, Derek.
Hey, Angela, how you doing?
He's going to be a national best-selling author with this book, Survive and Advance, Lessons on Living a Life Without Compromise. Now, I've known you for quite some time just from working with you through Pepsi. And then I remember when you said you were retiring from that. All right. And I want to get into your whole story because I feel like you can know somebody and done business with them, but not know their true story. And when I read your book, it definitely taught me a lot. So and I think it's a critical time because a lot of things that you talk about in here are things that we're going through right now with this new presidency, with these conversations about DEI.
Yes.
I think is really important.
Yes.
You could not have timed this better.
Yes.
I just want to
agree.
tell you.
And I'm ready to talk about it. I'm ready to talk about all the above. This is definitely a time for self-help and motivational literature. And actually, it was not my idea when I retired to write the book. It came from colleagues. Came from students on campus, people who reached out to me and said, hey, you've got 3.5 decades of experience in, one of the biggest companies in the world. You were at the top of the chain. How did you do that? You can't leave without sharing information. Are you going to go on speaking circuits? Are you going to do podcasts? How about a book? And the book thing seemed to be pretty intriguing. I did some research on it, hooked up with Page 2 Publishing. They're out of Toronto. And we started the process. And I had a ghostwriter. The first position of it was going to be more of a business book. They say, hey, read Bob Iger's book. We want a position like lessons in business, this, that, and the other. And then I started spending time with my ghostwriter. Our first stop was D.C., my hometown, and she spent a whole day with me, and we did everything. Went to all the old stops, man, all the old stomping grounds and schools and neighborhoods and just talked. And then all of a sudden she said, time out. This is no longer just a business book. This is a memoir. This is going to be about your life because you've already given me 2 or 3 chapters worth of information. So we then sort of pivoted to making it about the entire life in the picture, fitting the business side, and it was a big part of my life, but wanted to make sure it was more end-to-end and especially can inspire those who were also in my circumstances growing up.
Yeah, because you are from D.C. and you did grow up pretty much in a single-parent home with your mom raising you, and you refer to your father by his first name.
Never called him Dad.
Never called him Dad. And seeing you as a successful entrepreneur, and I have these conversations behind the scenes all the time with people as an executive, as an entrepreneur, that you are, a lot of times I've heard people talk about DEI recently and then talk about what do they call it? The meritocracy, right? And people act like DEI means that you don't deserve a position that you're in. You're just getting it because of the color of your skin or because you're a woman. And that's not the case at all.
No, not at all. First of all, I think your timing is good on this because it obviously is getting a lot of attention. I do think, one, I'm sort of, shocked by some of the pullouts that you're seeing some of the corporations and companies do.
Ooh.
But at the same time,
oh my gosh, disappointing.
I look at it as an opportunity. I do look at D&I, in all honesty, as something that was obviously really built and suited early in the 60s, 70s civil rights era. When I was growing up in D.C. at that time, we obviously know discrimination, racial bias, all that were very extreme back then. A lot of laws were being broken back then. And so you needed a platform like that to just stabilize things because things were so chaotic for us back then. And I think as time has marched on, the platform needed to evolve. And I think we're here today with the same sort of ideology that it might have had in the 60s, so at least the application of it or perception of it. And I do think that not evolving it has put us in the spot today where people now are sort of deprioritizing it, releasing the funds. Now, what I don't like when companies say they're going to deprioritize something and you don't tell us what you're going to do differently.
Right.
It's one thing to say, hey, this is outdated. I don't think it has the application more.
Into?
But what are you doing now? What are you
Right.
doing next? And so I think it's this bandwagoning or student body left, student body right, and these sort of herky-jerky moves on it, I think is just wrong. I think actually that is a big challenge to leadership on what are you doing? Like if you're going to come out, because you got to have compassion here. People are being affected by this, what's going on. They're sensitized to this. And in my mind, not having a response to what you are going to do is wrong.
The way we look at it is like y'all couldn't wait to be able to have the opportunity to be like, okay, we're not doing these programs anymore.
Right.
We're not giving these grants anymore. We're not providing
Right.
Opportunities anymore. And we have, and you talk about this in the book too. I have my little bookmarks, just
Love
so you
it.
know.
Thank you.
But we also talk about how important it is to have people who represent your consumer base also working at a company, right? You were at Pepsi. How long did you work at Pepsi?
35 years.
35 years from the bottom to the top. All right. So you knew how every single aspect, you even went over to Taco Bell.
I did.
For a period of time. I didn't even know Pepsi owned.
They did back in the 90s.
Yeah.
They did, early 90s.
I had no idea. But you went there, and it was, to me, some people might feel like things are not like on the level of, some people might look at that as like, oh, I'm not going to Taco Bell and learning how to do X, Y, and Z and getting behind the counter and doing this. But you had no problem getting in there, rolling up your sleeves and doing every single aspect of the business. And one thing that you talk about is even when you were going in, and you started off at Pepsi, like kind of going into the stores and stocking the shelves and making sure that visually everything looked the way that it was supposed to.
You got it, yeah.
Right? And but that's an important thing, because when you first started, it was kind of like, well, why is this product not moving the way that it should? And to know your market, they had you, I think, in Maryland?
I was in Baltimore.
In Baltimore,
yes.
Yeah, at first. So talk to me about that and the importance of you knowing the consumer base and why things weren't happening the way that they should.
I think everything starts with a consumer, in that type of business for sure. And so learning the aspects of how our products are sort of made, how they're moved around, and how they're sold, right? You're getting a very fundamental knowledge, gaining fundamental knowledge of that when you're starting on a route. So I'm learning really the full business comes together. It's a lot thrown at you, but there's times where, you see how promotions react in our business when products get priced cheaper, when they go on feature. And certainly in the inner city route that I had, the end of the month was very, very soft. But the beginning of the month was very, very strong. And so every time I had promotions or when money was on the street, the business really, really thrived. When things were not on sale, I had to be very deliberate about positioning our portfolio in the ways that the value products that we had, maybe the 2 liters of things that were priced a little bit cheaper, I could put those in the forefront to keep our brands healthy in the store and traction with the consumer. And those type of differences, those type of moves made a difference in sales throughout the entire month, because I didn't want to just sort of eat really, really good for 2 weeks and then not eat at all for 2 weeks. I had to find ways to keep the business moving. I also had to bring promotional things to the neighborhoods. I had to bring community programs to enable to show that we're investing while we're here as well. So we want you to buy our product, but also what are we doing to stand up the community on the other end?
Right.
And so I was very, very deliberate about bringing promotion, sponsorship dollars, community dollars to activate things throughout the community landscape, and that paid it forward in a big, big way. The loyalty you got from the consumers, the loyalty you got from the customers, store managers all saw that as a real value add for their business.
Even taking the store managers out to eat.
Absolutely.
Doing things like that makes a big difference. I always feel like in business, if people feel like they know you more on a personal level, it makes them more willing to do little things that can be really beneficial or give you tips or what's going on here. How can I help with that? Well, let me assist you in this way.
Absolutely. Got a lot of favors from that. And it's a hyper-competitive business. So the wins and jump balls go to relationship. And so I was always big on relationships. One of my 3 R's: results, relationships, and reputation. I believe all 3 of those, if you function at a very high level in those 3 areas, it will drive the most success for you as an individual, your professional life or your personal life. And that worked for me. I stuck on that formula. I drove it hard while also betting on myself, believing in myself, and being myself. I feel like those were the tenets of my sort of framework on how I was going to be successful in my professional career.
How important is it, you think, for executives to know how to do all aspects of a business? Because sometimes people get brought in, on the top line, and they don't understand what employees that are, working from the bottom up have to actually do on a day-to-day basis.
Right. I think it could go both ways. You can look at it both ends. One, you can look at somebody like me who did every job as a bit of I could take that as being a know-it-all, and almost to a point where I didn't embrace and listen or evolve the business in the way I need to, because I could be so headstrong on what I used to do and how it used to be when I was on the route. So it took a lot of discipline for me to evolve my thinking, and that as the portfolio grew, technology started to play more of a role in our business, that I had to kind of relearn it. And I had to get back out there and relearn. I had to hire people who can teach me things I wouldn't have known otherwise. Now, if you come in from the outside, it's a very, very tough situation coming from the outside in a business like that, not having all those fundamental skills. But, as a leader, you have to challenge yourself then to be really a great listener, to get out there and work with people. And so the leadership style, it's all about that. You can adjust that style whether you're the most experienced person or you're not the most experienced person. I think both ways can work, but you have to really apply yourself in the right way to truly get the benefit out of it.
Now, one thing you talked about was you said one of the reasons I joined Pepsi was that the Black management experience was front and center on their agenda. And Graves, you talk about Earl Graves, who had Black Enterprise.
I love him. Yeah.
Right. You said he was a significant part of that. A lot changed after that. Graves set the stage for not only who I was to become, but everyone at the company. Understanding diversity not only opened up more equity and equality for Pepsi employees, but it also had an immediate bottom line impact. And I think people do need to understand that now, as they're trying to say, like I said, we had this conversation about, and we see what Elon Musk is saying, we see what a lot of corporate executives are saying about DEI and acting like DEI must die. I think that's like their catchphrase, that they're using right now. But it does, I think studies have shown statistically even that when companies are more diverse, they actually impact the bottom line at a better, way better rate and have more of an impact that way.
And no doubt about it. And look, Pepsi was a company that, going back to the 40s, figured that out. They had the first corporate interns in corporate America, Alan McKellar Jr., who I had a relationship with until he passed away in 2018 when he was 98. Jeanette Mount, she went to Hampton. He went to South Carolina State. They were hired back in 1942. The first black sales force was put in place a couple of years behind that. And from there, you can see the company making the African-American consumer a priority. Mm-hmm. In the 40s, when that was a very difficult time in America. Segregation is still very much alive, very difficult environment, but morally and from a business case standpoint, the company said, hey, and the brand said, we're going to invest in that consumer. You fast forward to the 60s and 70s, in the civil rights era, company got behind it, started including African-Americans in a lot of their marketing materials. Again, it wasn't necessarily always embraced in a nice manner. There was a lot of criticism behind that, but they made it a priority that the consumer is going to be part of our growth strategy going forward. We can lock in this consumer because no one else was chasing that consumer. We're going to chase that consumer, really get behind it. Then you fast forward to 80s, and then I talked about this earlier, Michael Jackson. Mm-hmm. And you're signing these big mega stars now that are coming into the space. And then all of a sudden entertainment, pop culture, became important, signing big endorsement deals with celebrities, many of them who were African-American.
Right.
Then you get to the 90s, and it's hip-hop and Source Awards, and 2000, 2010, it became a core principle of the company strategy up until 2020. We had all the racial equality stuff. I was in the middle of all that. So there's a good example of an evolutionary journey a company can have to stay behind its cohorts that they deem to be important to the business for the business case, but also continuously invest and evolve the platform. And I get fixated on what we did in the 40s is what we do in the 2020. Mm-hmm. So a lot of companies can learn from that model.
Right.
I do talk about you got to be more comprehensive now. You can't just go in and lean in for a carve-out. This talk of mandate is over. That's over. That will not work going forward. The people in the companies won't embrace it. The younger people coming up don't embrace that. We have to be a lot more comprehensive at our discussions on uniqueness, celebrating uniqueness, leveraging uniqueness to win. Because you're right. The businesses and the companies and organizations that have the most uniqueness represent the marketplace, do the best job at winning. And so you can win-win in this business if you do it the right way.
And I know one thing that you love about your job was that said you love sports so much. You did have the opportunity to work with a lot of great athletes who were endorsing things. And you also talk about sports as being a metaphor to life, right, with your kids and everything and explaining to them. Can you just break down how you compare sports to how we should be living our lives and chasing our goals and dreams?
We look at the issues that are happening outside of sports. We just talked about this whole DE&I situation. You look in sports, and that's the ultimate where uniqueness is all blend together for a common mission and a common purpose, right? To win. Teams win. They built to win. They share their skills. They all bring different, unique skills to the table. They work in a way that is team-oriented, is team first, and there's a strategic plan, a strategy about winning and competing each and every day. I loved sports as a kid. I didn't have the resources to play club level, to play recreational ball like I wanted to, so I was basically just a playground kid, and I enjoyed it. That was my getaway. But I vowed that one day when I have a family, I'm going to invest heavily in sports because I see what it does to change lives, right? I see what it does for teamwork. I see what it does for discipline. I see what it does for focus. I love the element of competing. I love what you have to get in the zone and you have to deliver. You're accountable. You're accountable to yourself. You're accountable for your teammates. I love the fact the different coaches that we had in our lives can be extra parents, an extra set of eyes to our kids. Things that I may not be able to do for them, they're doing for them. You're right. So it's this whole comprehensive look at the way sports can impact lives positively. I'm all in. And it translates to the business world for me because I use a lot of lessons of a lot of famous coaches to drive culture. and a winning culture, right? And it really did level up things. I can use great examples like I use University of Alabama, Nick Saban, right? Who is a better person at leveling up a culture, going to a campus and transforming not only the school, but the entire industry, transformed based on his philosophy of leveling up, and bringing everybody together to find that common vision. That is powerful. And so what works in sports absolutely can translate to working in business and can work for your family and for kids if done the right way.
Yeah. And coaches can be, like for you in particular, a great kind of a substitute for if your father is not present in your life the way that you would have wanted. And how difficult was that for you to even write about that, or was it? Because sometimes it's hard to. We know you as an executive. I know you in that capacity, and being like, well, I had no idea. This is how Derek was brought up, and the things that he had to overcome. And did you even realize how much that affected you when you were younger, or was it something that as you were writing this book, you were like, damn, I didn't have X, Y, and Z because my father was. Right. In and out, and the things that he was doing, right. And how it affected your mom and your household, right. And even your youngest brother.
It brought a lot of trauma back to me when I was going through those particular chapters with my ghostwriter and telling those stories. It did bring back a lot of, like, wow, like how did I get through it? I mean, it really allowed me to sort of, again, really recommit to how strong my faith was, because that's really what got me through it. There's no way. As I played back some of the stories and some of the incidents, and so many situations were life and death. We certainly were breaking the law a lot. Mm-hmm. I was around drugs. I was around abuse. It was very difficult. And I had to be the dad basically to two younger brothers and be their big brother at the same time. It was very hard. There was times when I'm being a nurturing big brother, caring for them at 10, 11, 12 years old. And then I had to spank them sometimes, mm-hmm. when they got out of line. And that was a very hard thing to deal with emotionally. I let my mom down one time. I'll never forget this. This story came back up when I was writing the book. The rent money, my dad was always looking for the rent money so he could fuel his habit, substance abuse habit. And one day he came in the house and asked me where the rent money was. I happen to know where my mom used to hide the rent money. She hid it like under the carpet, underneath the bed in the bedroom. And one day somehow he came on and cornered me and said, "Where's that rent money? Where's that money? I know you know where it is." And he started coming at me and coming at me and coming at me and coming at me. And again, I don't want to let my dad down. I also was scared if I didn't give it to him what happened. And I told him where it was. And he grabbed the money, left the house, didn't see him for another day or two. My mom got home, the expression on her face when she looked underneath that carpet. She knew he was home, asked me what he was doing home, and then she went right to the carpet because she had an idea. Money was gone. I couldn't believe how terrorized she was. She was totally panicked and just really got to her knees. On a kid. Got to her knees and just started screaming and crying because she didn't know how she was going to pay her rent. And I feel like I let her down. I feel like I let her down because I was trying to just follow the orders from my dad. And I'm like at that time I think I'm like 9 years old. Mm-hmm. And so it was hard. Like the stress was there. And I go to school. I got kids that are trying to pick on me. I got to defend myself there. Right. So I'm constantly like living like an adult as a child. So I gained a lot of responsibility. I gained a lot of maturity. I gained a lot of perspective. I knew right from wrong for sure. Mm-hmm. And I had to convince myself and commit to myself that I was going to be doing the right things the rest of my life so that I am not putting my family in this situation. Or I may not even get out of the situation.
Right.
My brother didn't get out of the situation. I feel guilty for that as well. I feel like I probably didn't do enough for him to get out of the situation.
Well, I mean, it's hard. And I think anybody would put that on themselves. But from reading this book, it's hard. Like, you have your own family. You did everything that you could. And sometimes you can't help people that aren't going to accept that help, And, I mean, fortunately for you, it could go either way. When you think about growing up in certain circumstances, you go into school and having to wear the same clothes and getting teased at school, it actually helped you.
It did. Defend myself better,
become better at defending yourself. But it could have went a whole nother way. You just never know what can happen with people. And that's another thing that we have to also have. The circumstances that people grow up in, everybody doesn't have the luxury of being able to say, okay, we had it all growing up and I was able to they'll say, just go to school, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, do what you need to do. And that's not always the case. And everybody can't survive those circumstances in the same way.
Right.
Survive and advance.
Right. There's real trauma there. And every person that was in my situation can hope for the best. They can dream big. I want every young person to know, no matter what your circumstances are, you can find that light that says, I can create a better life for myself, but you're going to have to lock in and make choices right now, here and now. You can't wait till later on because later on may not be guaranteed. So take the moment now to lock in on betting on yourself, believing in yourself, and being yourself throughout your entire life, and you can dream as big as possible and likely going to be very, very successful.
Now, another thing that helped be successful was having the right woman by your side. And we can
Amen
never,
to that.
and we can never discount the power in that. And you almost threw that away too, being a...
I did.
I was like, this guy, but you were young, and I'll give you grace for that.
Thank you for that. I'm looking for that. I haven't gotten a lot of that so far with people that have read it, but thank you for giving me some grace on that. Yes.
Yeah, I think being in college and, being a little, and you did try to like overly justify, well, I did tell her I was in a relationship, but then she had a chance to see you with another woman, and she stuck to her guns and was not trying to mess with you for a little while, but it was the person that you kept on thinking about, that your mind went back to, that you were like, you kind of knew she was the one.
I did. I didn't necessarily know it then, but I knew it after I left and after we were separated, after I messed up. I knew that she was, and then I had to figure out, well, how am I going to go get her back? How am I going to work my way back in? I had a strategy. I mean, no doubt about it.
You have a strategy when it comes to
I had a strategy. She doesn't know that, but I had a strategy.
What's the strategy for people out there that may need some help too?
Hey, look, you gotta hunker down, get yourself right. Again, be the best version of yourself. You may get one more chance. I was just praying for one more chance to get some face time, to show that I was in a different place, right? And I think everybody, or at least most people, who get that moment, you've got to seize that moment. Now, had I messed up that moment, then this thing would have been a wrap. It would never happen. But I did take advantage of that one little moment, that one bright light that I have. I'm a guy that can see a little bit of light, and I can take advantage of it. I can see my way through that light, but you got to be prepared for that moment each and every time. And I was that moment, and thank God it worked out, because our vision has been completely aligned from that day on. Maybe a couple of days after, because it wasn't that easy the first day. But,
as it shouldn't be, because probably part of what helped you was the fact that it wasn't so easy right away. Right? Because somebody has to know their value to know that I'm not just going to let you do whatever and then I'm right here.
Right.
Sometimes people take advantage of that. But it does feel like whatever it is that you want to do, you go really hard to make that happen. Do you feel like ever at a time, because just reading this and reading about you taking flights, going to get your MBA, having babies in the house, like so many different things at once, and being exhausted and all of that, do you ever feel like your work-life balance was off? Like when you look back at it, I know that seeing where you are now, amazing that you've been able to retire, be an entrepreneur, and we'll talk about that in a second. But looking back where you're like, man, I was really so like overly focused on work, or do you think that's necessary for people?
I feel like the balance was there. I really do. I feel like I gave it my best shot, and there were times when it may not have felt even, and there's times it went the other way, because like sports was the anchor of our household in terms of activities. I felt like I made the majority of sports events. That was a big deal for me, but that required some very early morning flights. That required some getting in really late at night or driving extensive hours to get somewhere. But to me, the calendar management of that and being there for my kids and the sports, not just the sports things, but also the academic things, I feel like I made at least probably 75 to 80% of their key activities.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. I felt like that was a real key thing, but I communicated well with the company. I told them what was going on. They knew. You say when you're sort of transparent about who you are and people know who you are and you bring your whole self to work, they know that I was about my kids and about the sports. They knew that was something I didn't have in my life, and therefore that was something I was investing in. I want to be there for those moments. I want to be there for the moments when that game is over to put your arm around your kid and tell them you love them. They did great.
It's interesting because I feel like work ethic is different now. Like for me, having businesses and dealing with employees, I definitely feel like people will be like, I need to, a lot more on self-care nowadays, a lot more on, taking days and time off. I feel like when I was coming up, I worked like nonstop and really hard. I literally was like sometimes, and I still do this to this day, like 7 days a week of work. But I feel like now it's more like, look, I need a hybrid situation, or I need a personal day. I need this, I need that. We didn't used to have that.
No.
Coming up. What do you think about the new culture when it comes to work with the newer generation?
I think it works, and I think it's actually important because, in the book also it talks about the health issue that I went through. And had I spent more time on self-care not just being getting a massage and getting a manicure, pedicure, but also self-care of my physical being, I might not have ever had, that disease come my way. So I think the time, as long as people are investing in their whole selves, now if you're using the time and it, if it's playtime, it's playtime. I got no problem with that. I like playing a lot of golf, so I put that as part of my lifestyle as well. But making sure that your health is good, now that you have the time to get physicals and get checkups and stay on top of your your maintenance, I think is so important, critically important in life now, because I can talk about, I'm a hypocrite when I say I'm there for everybody else, but I'm not there for myself. If I'm not the best version of myself, I can't be the best version to you or to others. And so that health piece was a really wake-up call for me. And I do think what we went through in 2020 has now allowed for the opportunity to people to better right the ship with things that matter most to them. That could be relationships, that could be with their family, that could be with their kids, that could be with their education, that could be with their health. And so for me, if you're taking advantage of it to make you a better person, I think the ROI on that back to the company and your family is going to be exponentially greater than the old days.
Right.
Where it is, you have to show up at work. I have to be seen at work for me to get credit for working hard. I think that model, again, is dated, and I think there's new ways of reinventing yourself to do what you can do and then some by having the more balanced structure in place every single week.
All right. Now, another thing that you talk about in great detail is going to an HBCU. You went to Hampton and you're a Kappa.
Love it. Love it. Yo, yo. Yo, baby, yo.
Oh, which is such a big deal. But when people are talking about HBCUs and you talk about Pepsi embracing the Black community and also partnering with HBCUs. That was some of the things that happened there, and diversity when it comes to that. What did going to an HBCU do for you? Because sometimes people who are listening, if you have kids or if you're a student and you're trying to figure out what you want to do, what made going to an HBCU what helped? How did that help make you the person who you are today?
I think it was actually transformational. My time at Hampton, I look back on it. I'm 58 now. Those 4 years there, I still say were the best 4 years of my life. Right? For obviously all the circumstances we're talking about. I got my degree. I got my job at Pepsi. I pledged Kappa. I met my wife there. I got a business management degree. I was Mr. Business Club, and so my life really went from whatever you want to call it, double to triple what it was in terms of experiences and knowledge and confidence. I was allowed to be myself there. I evolved. I was allowed to be myself, but also grew. I was around very smart kids, very bright individuals, leaders, people who were getting things done, real badasses. And I thrived in that environment. I was a little intimidated at the beginning, overwhelmed by that, because I thought I was going to be a big man on campus coming in, freshman from D.C. And when you get there and you see the power of the students that are there and then the history and, the collaboration of the students and the social environment, it was something I was amazed by, and I took it in though. I took it in as a growth moment. Each and every semester got better and better and better. By the time I was a senior, I had a tremendous amount of influence on that campus. I was extremely confident in what I was doing. I was doing well in my grades. I was the dean of pledges. I was Mr. Business Club. I was affecting change in a positive way because I learned from people in front of me how to go do it. And so that richness, that tradition still lives with us. Now, when we moved away for years to the West Coast, we couldn't come back a lot. And so we got disconnected from our home by the sea. But once we got back to the East Coast, certainly when we got down in Florida, we're now come back on a routine basis. I'm a trustee at the school, so I'm heavily involved. Our kids playing basketball there. So we're involved in school in ways that we've never have been. I was always bringing Pepsi resources back there, recruitment, community activation, brand activations. So it's really the gift that keeps on giving. Hampton is the gift that keeps on giving. And I use that work to spread out to other HBCUs too. So I wasn't just a solo act.
Right.
The only school I care about was Hampton. I care about all the HBCUs and our efforts on recruitment, the efforts on brand activation, the efforts on community engagement and support was widespread throughout not only the Mid-Atlantic areas and Northeast areas, but also particularly in the South as well. So I'm proud to be an HBCU student. I want other people to be proud. There's challenges in the space, no doubt about it. Raising money and funding and succession planning with presidents and things like that. There's some challenges that are out there. But, I'm doing everything in my power to help try to shore those areas up and create some strategic roadmaps that could be more beneficial so we can be certainly more financially healthy. We can have a pipeline of the future leaders that are on campus or other campuses. So when you get openings, you can just basically fill them pretty quickly. And then also just keeping the spirit and traditions alive of the school. So what a proud experience that I could talk about for hours on how proud I am to be a Hampton graduate and HBCU graduate.
Yeah, and even when you were going other places, you were able to tap into your fraternity and resources in other cities because you moved around a lot, for work. Now, I do want to ask you this because before we started this interview, we were talking about Target and everything that's been happening with them cutting back on DEI. We see people talking about boycotting Target, but we also see Black-owned brands that are currently in Target that are concerned about how is that going to affect other brands. And as a general consumer and as a Black person and as a business owner, I have brands, my Coffee Up lists people that's in Target and on Amazon. So that is something that we think about, but we also want to make sure that we're thinking bigger picture. What are your thoughts about Target and them cutting back on DEI initiatives, and what should people be doing? Because right now, I think people are looking to try to figure out what is the thing that I can do that will be impactful.
Yeah, I think it is a challenging time, no doubt, when you have major players like that step in who over a long period of time demonstrated their support for the community and the culture in the big ways, like, ELC, and there's all type of recognition going their way because of some of these things. And so I do think it's a difficult time. I don't know the sort of the basis for it or what they've articulated their positioning is. I haven't really spent that much time on their particular situation, but I hope that they can have a conversation, or at least have communication internally first, getting themselves together where they're talking to their associates and their culture about the different moves they're going to make. Now, this is all about evolving and elevating for the greater good. Again, let's have that conversation. Let's be open to that conversation, because you have to be open to the greater good now. The silos, the carve-outs, things like that just bring a lot of polarization inside a culture that does create a lot of dysfunctionality and strife. And so you don't want that either. But at the same time, you can't just walk away and say, we're no longer committed to the space anymore. We're no longer committed to cohort.
Especially because that's what they really kind of like got applauded for.
They were tooting.
Praised
yeah,
them for
absolutely.
That. Yeah.
Completely. No doubt about it.
Some organizations were not like, oh my God, I can't believe that, Meta is cutting back. We're like, okay, shocker.
Right,
but
right.
when you see Target and
no
you're like,
doubt about it.
A lot of their platform is about supporting these brands, that's a tough thing.
I think there's time now, it's time more than ever for conversations with them. I would, brand owners that are in there, clients, customers, need to be reaching out to have a conversation. Mm-hmm. Don't put the business out there on social media. Don't put the business out in the media. Go in and have a conversation, because there was history there of supporting the space. And then, again, the pivoting, what caused the pivoting, need some answers on that. I think as customers or clients and supporters, the answers need to be given, particularly, again, where they were before. And I think there needs to be also, instead of waiting for them to come up with the idea or the solution, sometimes bringing solutions to retailers like that, customers like that, leadership like that can help the effort move along a lot faster and a lot more collaborative way. So I think if we leave it to just executives sitting in a room and figuring out the new roadmap for the future, I think we're all going to be disappointed at what we see. I think it's time to build the bridges, get in there and say, hey, how can we be of help? Here's some ideas that we have. We're not going to go in and acknowledge and try to push for mandates and carve-outs and guarantees. We're going to try to go in and talk about a holistic future that's much more comprehensive, that's much more collaborative, and again, a lot more compassionate, because I do think that you're dealing with humans, you're dealing with entrepreneurs, you're dealing with associates, and so you can't just shut off the human valve in all this as well. There is a component of empathy that has to be involved in this process. So I think brand owners and leaders need to get in there, start dialing up conversations with one of the most senior leaders in the company who are Black, and then also try to get to the top. They have a great reputation, again, of supporting the space before, but I think what's most important now is where do we go from here?
Yeah.
Before we start getting too challenging, starting to get defiant, starting to get really confrontational, let's use a very mature, strategic approach, acknowledging that the platform should evolve. It should. Mm-hmm. It should evolve, and I think it's the right thing to do. Now, coming out of that, there has to be some action, there has to be some declaration, there has to be some movement on the agenda. And I think if with that collaborative approach, you'll see leaps and bounds progress from organizations that take that approach. Some organizations will continue to resist. Some will just not do anything. That's going to happen. We have to be prepared for that and deal with that. But I think the ones that, at some stage set standards or really made strides, we still need them to deliver holistically. And they're too big of an outfit not to be part of that solution going forward.
We named them Target. That's how they that's how they got Target.
Yeah.
And it's just interesting because I also, when I was looking on social media, I was seeing some people, posting angry about them cutting back DEI, but then I seen people in the comments like, good, now I can shop there again.
Right.
We're such a divided country right now. Or seeing Costco, who is still saying that they're still going to go ahead with their DEI initiatives. I see people being like, I won't be going there anymore, because people think that DEI is, I see white people think it's racist against white people. And that's what their way of explaining it is. Like, oh, this shouldn't be happening. Why should they be getting X, Y, and Z that they don't deserve? Right. And I just want to make sure that myth is not out there. But, people believe what they want to believe.
They believe they want to believe. But I do think it's a growth moment, even for the companies that are saying they're staying the course. You need to evolve the platform. The platform has to evolve to be more comprehensive, again, to be more collaborative. You've got to have all this uniqueness celebrated and participating in ways they never have before to make sure this is sustainable, because everything we do, everything we say now are going to be in cycles. And we don't want these 3, 4, 5 year cycles. 2020, we had a whole cycle where all this funding, people writing checks, it was kind of an in your face moment, right? Where what you going to do? What you going to do? And everybody's like, okay, well, we're going to write a check. We're going to make a statement.
And then things quietly went
Absolutely.
away.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of people knew that was going to happen.
Yeah.
And so that was a time really for evolution, not sort of in your face, or not sort of back to the mandate kind of mantra that I think happened in a lot of cases, or sort of perception of that. So best thing to do, leaders need to step up. It's a time of this can be turned around to a real growth situation. People don't need to head down. And also the culture needs to say, what can I do to help? Not what people are going to do for me, but what can I do to help the companies that are in this situation, how to help them through that.
Now, you did work, like you said, at Pepsi for 35 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I want to talk to you about stepping away from that. It's kind of like when you played sports your whole life and now you're not playing on the team and you retired from that. Now, what's next? What's the next chapter? I want to talk about you stepping away from Pepsi, because I know that was not I don't know if was it an easy decision for you?
35 years is a long time
is.
for anything, right? It's a long time. And then you get to a point where you do have goals and ambitions that you want to carry forward the rest of your life. And so it was a time where, once you get to 55 there, certainly the classic comes in that I came in with in the late 80s and mid 80s, early 80s. Usually the dismounting window was 55 because that's the way a lot of the pension kicked in.
Okay.
But those things changed over time. So it wasn't necessarily the pension that sort of drove me and motivated me. It was really more or less around the opportunity now to go do something else. And because when I was part of these programs that were helping these entrepreneurs, I started really thinking about how can I be my own entrepreneur? How can I get in that space myself? How can I take everything I've learned now, it wasn't necessarily I wanted to be a restaurant owner, things like that, but there were other businesses that I got involved. I was hanging out a lot with entrepreneurs, and I started to see the promise of a second, call it like a second career, but the second chapter. Mm-hmm. And so using everything I had, capitalizing on that, taking a break, because when you're in the grind like that, you can't take time to figure it out in the grind. It's just too intensive an environment. So I actually needed to step away, and I thank God every night for doing it, because you know what? My oncologist told me that I had cancer for 18 months. So I had cancer my last year I was there.
Wow.
I was carrying cancer the whole year. So all of 2022 I had cancer.
That's crazy.
And I didn't know about it. And so if you don't believe in God, hey, sorry for you, but I do. And I always have. And that moment. So I get there to say it wasn't that methodical. It was just time. Mm-hmm. It happened. I probably saved my life doing that.
Yes, absolutely.
And I've also reinvented myself for the second chapter, which now is an entrepreneur, an author, which I'm so proud to have completed this project. I'm investing in private companies. I'm on more nonprofit boards. I'm serving schools. I'm in this real go-giver phase of my life. I was go-getter, now go-giver. Right. I'm paying it forward. I was in the pay it now chapter for a long time. Now I'm in the pay it forward chapter.
And I will say, when you were at Pepsi, you were definitely one of the people on the front lines that I saw always trying to do things that were trying to help other people. And I've witnessed that firsthand. That's why I was very excited for you when you left. And then you're also the first franchise owner of 10 Big Days Cheesesteaks locations in Florida. Congratulations on that.
Thank you for that. Yeah, that's exciting.
Yeah, and I love, listen, the two of them are amazing at what they do. So talk to me about what made you decide to do that, because clearly you've made these relationships. Like you said, you've been on the ground, you've been seeing the work that people are doing. And so that gave you kind of an insight into what you knew you wanted to do next.
Mm-hmm. It did. And particularly with those two, because I support them in a big way at Pepsi, right? So the part of the whole dig-in program, and right around COVID, matter of fact, we were here. Back in 2021, we were here over in the X room having the interview when we came on the stage. So I got behind them pretty early because I saw the growth they had. I believe in their vision. I believe in their brands. I believe in them as a couple. I think they're amazing, and we treat them. We're family now. We have such a great, strong relationship. But at the time that I retired, I always kidded him and said, "Hey, I want to put one store in Florida, 'cause I love cheesesteaks. I grew up as a kid loving cheesesteaks, right? Philadelphia cheesesteaks, right? I grew up in D.C., but when I had a Philly cheesesteak, man, it was like one of the best days of.
Which place did you go to in Philly for the?
El Sandro's.
Okay.
Yeah, I like that.
Everybody has their favorites.
Yeah, that was one of my favorites. Yeah.
Okay.
I go visit my buddies. We go to Eagles games, or we go to Atlantic City to gamble.
I literally drove to Philly one time just to get a cheesesteak.
What was your spot? What's your spot?
We used to go to Ish Kabibbles.
Okay.
But it was just because I also liked being on South Street.
Right. Okay. I used to be on South Street too. I used to I wanted the business there. I wanted to have all those relationships from a pouring rights standpoint, right? So I wanted to get cheesesteaks where they were pouring Pepsi.
Always work. It's always about work.
It was then. But so I said, give me one. And he's like, Derek, I need you to get more than one now. I'm trying to scale up. I want to be,
Derek
one day
Derek.
big as Jersey Mike's, right? And I'm like, you know what? We can do that. I bring a lot of experience on scale. I know how to scale things up. I know how to move fast with that. He brings a great brand to the table, a great vision for the table, how he sees the future of his brand. He does remarkable work, obviously, in the community, so he's operating with a strong sense of purpose at what he does. So he has given me sort of the foundation ingredients now where I can build on that. I can scale up new markets. I can scale across different platforms. We're in sporting arenas, for example, have sports deals, right? So there's going to be a whole lot of growth that we're going to see coming out of the business. So he and I sit at the table. I'm a franchisee. I got 10 units I'm building out over a period of time, but I'm also at the table with him on building the strategic roadmap for scale growth in the company. So it's a fun journey to, one, support them, him, being who they are, where they came from, the category, and me just having something now fun to do. I'm going to actually use that as a catalyst to probably get in other businesses. So over time, you're going to see me expand the portfolio of things that I end up doing because I love being an entrepreneur now. It's fun,
Well, I have a coffee brand. But anyway.
I know you do. You had a juice brand. I was asking about those juices.
I'm going to be honest, the juices brand, it was a lot of work. The price of produce just going up and down, the bottling, and I know you would know about the whole issues with bottling. And then, it was definitely for me, having my own brand and trying to scale it to the point where the more you purchase, right, the cheaper it is. But I just couldn't do the mass scale that I would need to do to bring the price down and then also get it in stores because it's something that expires
pretty quickly.
Within 3 months. And so that also made it really difficult. It was just a lot of learning.
I was buying in Rouse's. You were in New Orleans. I was going down New Orleans buying. Yeah.
Shout out to them for that.
Yeah, that was big time. Yeah.
Yeah. So and I did that, and it was again, like I said, it's me on the front lines, but I do still have a day job. That's very time consuming.
Yes.
And I always felt like if I went full blast into something like that,
kill it.
One thing I would say about myself is I believe that whatever it is that I decide to do, it will end up being successful if that's what I put all my time and energy into. But I do love my job here as well. And so even me working with the coffee, I always look at that as something that I do that as well, and I wish I had, and I'm going to dedicate more time to it, but it's something that I know once I'm full-fledged into, it's going to be...
Right, that vision's there for you,
yeah.
Absolutely. And you should look forward. That's going to be a fun chapter when you get to that chapter.
And it means a lot to me also just from the standpoint of the history of coffee and the culture of it,
right,
and just what it does here in the United States. So I think another thing I wanted to talk to you about is you got your MBA in the midst of all of this.
Yes.
Like I said, having kids and getting married and being an executive and moving to Phoenix and doing all these different things. What made you decide that was something? Because I'm a big believer in also degrees and getting further education and helping build myself up in that way.
Yeah, it was a whole elevation package, right? So love what I did at Hampton, love the Bachelor of Science I got in business management, but I knew early on in the cycle of Pepsi that was not going to be enough to get me to the highest levels. I needed to enhance that experience. I tried to force myself to do it in the D.C. area. I was going to University of Maryland at night, taking 2 classes, and was going to school 4 days a week and getting home at 10 o'clock at night and had to do homework all weekend. Yeah, that was hard. That was really a hard grind. So I actually ended up dropping out of that because it was just too much. I just got married, and it was just too much. The load was too much. I was barely getting B's in the class. I was scrambling. Didn't feel good. That's not me. That wasn't my best version of myself. Mm-hmm. So when we then moved from Maryland to Ohio, I did some research on the schools there. They got great universities there. Certainly, University of Cincinnati is a great university, and Xavier. And Xavier had a great MBA program. It was about 19, 20 months. It was every weekend. I talked to my employer. I was with Taco Bell then. They said, absolutely, because that was the culture. A lot of the market managers in my jobs were getting MBAs or had MBAs. And it was a roadmap for you to get to further down the executive path. Because when you start looking at your background, your credentials, there's going to be this question around strategic thinking. Mm-hmm. And having that MBA certainly elevates sort of that perception of that and really gives you the real experiences that you are more strategic coming out of that. And so I was happy enough to get in Xavier. I was one of the youngest people in the class. Transformational at being in a room with doctors, entrepreneurs, corporate executives, all walks of life in there. 42 of us had the greatest time ever. We were in pods. So there was a group of 7 of us that I was with the whole time. You basically sat at the same table. You studied together every week. You did presentations together. You did everything basically together. Went to lunch together, doing breaks. And that group was so dynamic for me and such a great inspiration for me. I learned a ton out of that. And once I got out of that program, I bounced. I bounced. It wasn't just the piece of paper. I tell people it's not the piece of paper that gets it. It's the experiences that make you better. And so I was coming out of there a lot more mature, a lot more strategic, a lot more balanced from an executive maturity standpoint. And I may not have felt it, but I can tell everybody around felt it.
Okay, the
confidence.
confidence.
That was different. Absolutely. Yeah. You don't know what you're going through it. You feel like, okay, I got the MBA now, and you're looking, you're asking and wondering, where does this go from here? But then you see the rise, you see how the elevation is happening around you. People look at you differently. You're saying things a little bit differently. People are intrigued, want to be around you. And so I felt that elevation going into the executive role in Phoenix, and that just catapulted me to ways that I could never believe. And so I absolutely believe it's a must for individuals that are looking to go high as high, to have that next level of educational experience like that. You can do it in ways that are efficient for your family. This was still hard to do because I'm giving up, a day a week, and I'm doing it for almost 2 years. We had the international trip, which is also transformational, to go over to London and Germany and study, with companies over there for 2 weeks. That was a great experience as well. But it was a game changer for me, no doubt about it. And so my life has been a series of game changers where I look at things that continuously can elevate me, and I knew that the educational part was a critical part of that sometime early in my career. So I'm glad I did it. I failed at it the first time. I even looked at shortcut MBAs. I was trying to do stuff online and stuff like that. This is back in like the early 90s, right? And I was trying so hard to get the MBA.
Right.
I knew you needed it. And I started playing the shortcut game. I'm like, Derek, this is not your game. This is not who you are. You haven't done shortcuts or anything else. Why are you doing the shortcuts now? Why are you trying to rush this process? Let it flow. And in Ohio, it flowed, it worked, it was great, and it changed my whole trajectory in my mind of my career after that experience.
I would tell you, I'm a big fan of that because whenever I get into something, I'm always like, how can I further my education? That's why I got my real estate license. I actually last week sold my first house, and it felt good because having those conversations, knowing the language that you're supposed to use, knowing the strategies, knowing like, okay, if we do this, we say this, well, if they're offering this all cash offer, then I know they have this. If I offer, it just was amazing for me to feel confident enough to be able to negotiate that deal and close it.
And now you're gonna rip them off now, like so fast now. Watch what happens. But don't take shortcuts. The message is you can't shortcut your way to the elevation. That's what I call the elevation package. You cannot take shortcuts. You have to put the work in. The experiences really is what matters. It's not the test and the homework assignments. It's the experiences. The experiences with people, the experiences with the coursework, the ability to think differently. Those are the things that really push you to the elevation side.
And listen, I know we're having a whole long conversation. I want to ask you about one last thing. When we talk about Earl Graves and him being a mentor to you, and he gave you suits that he was about to donate, and he said, look, take these suits. You can do whatever you need to do to them, right, to make sure that they fit you right. Whatever you don't take, I'm going to donate them anyway. And you took all of these suits. How important do you think it is how you show up and how you come dressed? Because sometimes people act like it's not as important. If you have the skills and you have the background to be able to do it and you want to show up as your quote unquote authentic self, you can do that. But for you, those suits were important for you.
Let me talk about, first of all, pay tribute to Mr. Graves. He is one of my heroes. You took ask people who are one of your heroes. He's one of my heroes. He took me under his wing in ways that no one else has ever done before. I come back to my very first interview with him up here in New York at Black Enterprise headquarters back in 1990. Then he offered me the job in D.C. and then sort of taking me under his wing. And I spent like a whole day with him that day. It was the suits, watching him navigate through D.C., got on the phone with the mayor. It was a hole in the ground, so it was construction. He's like, what's going on the ground there? And like, well, I don't know, Mr. Graves. He's like, well, let me find out. Calls the mayor's office. We need to find out what's going on the ground. We're over in the mayor's office. We're sitting with the mayor, shaking hands. So I'm watching him navigate. We called President of Hampton, Dr. Harvey, on the phone. He's like, Bill, I got one of your alumni here. I want to I can't make your graduation. I'm going to send him down to be our representative for your graduation weekend. I'm going to put a couple bucks in his pocket, have a good time down there. But he just looked after it. And he has such a high standard for himself on the relationship side and on the professional look side. So when I talk about my 3 R's, results, relationships, reputation, that look is super important. It's about your image, it's about your character, and it's about your exposure. Image is a really critical part of your reputation and your brand. And so if you're not looking the part, how in the world can you translate that to elite performance with the brands that you sell, or the execution that you're asking for, or landing new deals if you're not showing up in ways that are the highest levels, and he was the gold standard for that. You know, I don't know if I ever met that standard that he had, because he was such a high standard with that, but it taught me that look is everything. Look, feel, touch means everything for your brand. And I absolutely think it matters a lot. I go to schools to recruit, and I have people that show up with all different looks. I have people that show up in sweatpants. That moment, like, why are you even here? You know,
that's important. I just wanted to,
kids that show up in suits, I'm going like, you look the part. And so when they raise their hand, I'm immediately going to the person that has a suit on and raises their hand.
Who made the effort?
Absolutely, you made the effort. You showed up in a way that you wanted to be here. You recognized the moment that there was a senior executive from a Fortune 50 company, and you recognized that moment, and you showed up, and you got my attention showing up. You showed up. You're not getting my attention because you didn't show up. You didn't take the time to show up when I'm making an investment in you. And I think that's real important, that you need to show up. If you're willing to take that next step, you have to look the part to do that. So I think it's critically important.
All right. Well, listen, I appreciate you so much for coming through. I told you I read this entire book, Survive in Advance.
Thank you so much.
It was a fantastic read, especially because, I mean, even if you have never met Derek before in your life, you're going to love reading this book because it's something that is going to be relatable to you no matter what it is that you've gone through. There's going to be something in here that you're like, I need to do this, or, you know, I feel the same exact way about it. So, Lessons on Living a Life Without Compromise. Congratulations on everything that you've achieved in every facet of your life. And I'm so happy you wrote a book.
Yes, well, thank you for that. I'm happy too. And it was driven by other people. And so thank you for putting on your shelf. I know you have a distinguished collection.
You know I love books.
I'm glad it made the shelf.
I was so happy because I think it's also signed inside. And so I always say books are like artwork to me. And so to be able to have a best-selling author on my shelf with a signed book, you know, that means a lot to me. So congratulations on all of this. And like I said, I love this new journey that you've embarked on. You've inspired me.
Let's collaborate. I want to help you and support you in any way I can. Let's keep our friendship, partnership going. It's been great. You were exceptional to work with at my time at Pepsi, and there's a whole new chapter.
And I saw you had an amazing book launch party. I saw you post it, and I was like, I would have flew down for that one. Okay.
Hey, stay tuned. I'm gonna do one in DC, so you get the invite.
I can make it to DC.
Okay,
no doubt.
All right, good.
All right. So Derek Lewis, Survive in Advance. This book is out today.
Appreciate you. Thank you.